James Thompson straightened his expensive silk tie as he walked through the busy airport terminal. At 45 years old, he had worked incredibly hard to build himself from nothing into one of Britain's most successful technology business owners. His company, Thomson Digital Solutions, had just signed a massive £1 billion deal with major corporations all across Europe. This deal would change everything for his business and secure his future. As he approached the first-class boarding gate, James smiled warmly at the airline staff members who were preparing for the flight. He had flown this exact route from London to Manchester dozens of times over the years for important business meetings. Today felt different though, and much more special, after months of working non-stop on this huge business deal. He was finally going home to visit his elderly mother, Margaret, who had been waiting patiently to see him. James had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. His mother lived alone in a small house in Manchester, and he knew she missed him terribly when he travelled for work. She had raised him by herself after his father left when James was just a child. Margaret had worked jobs to support them, and James never forgot the sacrifices she made for his future. "Excuse me, sir," called a security officer named Robert in a stern voice. "We need to check your boarding pass right now." James politely handed over his first-class ticket, which he had purchased several weeks ago through his company's travel department. Robert examined the ticket with unusual care and suspicion, holding it up to the light and studying every detail. Then he whispered something quietly to his colleague, David, who looked over with concern. "I'm sorry, sir, but there seems to be a serious issue with your booking," David announced loudly, causing other passengers in the waiting area to turn round and stare directly at James. "What kind of issue could there possibly be?" James asked calmly, though his heart began to race with anxiety. He had never experienced anything like this before during his many years of traveling. "We're going to need you to step aside while we verify your ticket and check our system," Robert said, his voice carrying clearly across the entire waiting area where dozens of people were sitting. James felt the familiar and painful sting of judgment in the stares of his fellow passengers. Despite wearing his expensive tailored suit and carrying his leather briefcase, despite all his business success and achievements, he was being treated like a criminal who had done something wrong. Other first-class passengers watched with curious and suspicious eyes as he was escorted away from the boarding area toward a small security office. The walk to the security office felt like the longest walk of James's life. He could hear people whispering behind him, and he knew they were making assumptions about why he was being removed from the boarding area. His face felt hot with embarrassment, but he kept his head high and maintained his dignity. "This is clearly a mistake," James said respectfully to the security officers. "I've been flying with this airline for many years without any problems. I'm a frequent customer and have never had any issues with my bookings." The security officers spent 20 long minutes checking and rechecking his ticket, calling their supervisors and looking at their computer systems. James sat quietly in the small office, watching through the window as other passengers boarded his flight. He could see the airplane being prepared for departure, and he knew he was going to miss it. Finally, after what felt like hours, the security officers admitted there was absolutely no problem with his ticket. Everything was perfectly valid and legitimate, but the damage was already done. James had missed his flight, and more importantly, he had been humiliated in front of dozens of people who would remember this incident. As he sat alone in the quiet airport cafe, feeling frustrated and disappointed, James received an unexpected phone call from his business partner, William. "James, you need to know something important about Skyline Airlines," William said urgently over the phone. "They're in serious financial trouble. Much worse than anyone in the public realizes." James listened carefully as William explained the airline's hidden debts, their desperate need for investors, and their rapidly declining stock price. The company was struggling to stay in business and was looking for someone to invest large amounts of money to save them from bankruptcy. As he hung up the phone, James felt something shift deep inside him. This wasn't just about missing a flight anymore or being embarrassed in public. This was about something much bigger and more important, for the first time in years. James felt truly motivated by something beyond just making money and achieving business success. He saw an opportunity not just for profit, but for real change that could help other people. That evening, James sat quietly in his beautiful London penthouse apartment, staring out through the large windows at the sparkling city lights below. His mind kept wandering back to his childhood in Manchester, where he had grown up in a small council flat with his loving mother, Margaret. The memories came flooding back like scenes from an old movie. He remembered being just 8 years old, sitting at their tiny kitchen table and watching his mother carefully count coins from a glass jar. To buy groceries for the week, Margaret Thompson had worked 2 exhausting jobs every single day just to keep food on their table and pay the rent. She would clean offices late at night when the city was quiet and empty, then wake up early to serve customers at the local bakery during the busy morning hours. Money was always tight in their household, but his mother never complained or showed her frustration. Instead, she would always find time to sit with young James and share her wisdom about life and how to handle difficult situations. "James," she would say in her gentle voice, "no matter how people treat you, you must never let it make you bitter or angry. Use those experiences to become better and stronger." Those simple but powerful words had carried him through many challenging times during his university years, where he was often the only black student in his engineering classes. Other students would sometimes stare at him or make him feel like he didn't belong there. But he remembered his mother's advice and used their doubts to motivate himself to work even harder. The words had given him incredible strength when banks initially refused his business loans, even though his ideas were brilliant and innovative. Bank managers would look at him with suspicion and doubt, questioning whether he really understood technology and business. Some clients had also questioned his abilities despite his amazing innovations that could help their companies succeed. Now, 27 years later, James was worth over £2 billion and had become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in all of Europe. His artificial intelligence company had completely revolutionized how businesses operated across the continent. He owned beautiful properties in 5 different countries and had been featured on the covers of major business magazines around the world. Yet today, at a simple airport gate, he had been made to feel exactly like that scared and confused 8-year-old boy again. The feelings of embarrassment and frustration were exactly the same, even though his circumstances had changed dramatically. James picked up his phone and called his research team, who worked for his company and could find information about any business or organization quickly and efficiently. "I need everything you can find about Skyline Airlines," he said clearly. "Financial records, board members, stock information, employee details, absolutely everything you can discover." His research team was known for being thorough and fast, and within just a few hours, detailed information began arriving at his penthouse. James spread the papers across his large dining table and began reading carefully. The information was even more interesting than he had expected. Skyline Airlines was facing complete bankruptcy within 6 months if they couldn't find new investors immediately. Their stock price had fallen by 60% in the past year alone, and passengers were choosing other airlines because of poor service and constant delays. James discovered something else that was particularly interesting and important. The airline's parent company, British Aviation Group, owned several other businesses that were also struggling financially. They were actively looking for someone wealthy enough to buy them out completely and seize all their companies from closing down. As James studied the detailed financial reports late into the night, he realized the situation was much bigger than just one airline having problems. This was a real chance to create positive change across an entire industry that affected millions of people every day. He thought deeply about all the other people who might have experienced exactly what he had experienced today. How many innocent passengers had been turned away, embarrassed in public, or discriminated against simply because of how they looked? How many had simply accepted this unfair treatment and moved on with their lives without fighting back? James thought about his mother's words about using bad experiences to become better rather than bit. He realized that this was his opportunity to turn his painful experience into something positive that could help many other people. After hours of thinking and planning, James made a decision that would change everything for him and for thousands of other people. He wasn't going to just file a simple complaint with the airline or seek financial compensation for his embarrassment. He was going to buy the entire company and transform it completely. The next morning, James woke up early and called an emergency meeting with his legal team and financial advisors. He needed to discuss his bold plan with the people who had helped him build his successful business empire over the years. In his impressive boardroom overlooking the beautiful Thames River, he laid out his surprising plan to a room full of shocked and confused faces. His trusted lawyer, Thomas Mitchell, who had worked with James for over 15 years, looked completely stunned by what he was hearing. Thomas had helped James through many difficult business decisions, but this was unlike anything they had ever discussed before. "You want to buy an entire airline?" Thomas asked in disbelief. "James, that's not your industry at all. You're a technology expert and computer genius, not an aviation specialist who knows about planes and airports." James looked round the room at his team of advisors, all of whom seemed worried about his unusual plan. But he felt calm and confident about his decision, knowing it was the right thing to do. "That's exactly why this will work perfectly," James replied with quiet confidence in his voice. "I'm not thinking like a typical airline executive who only cares about profits. I'm thinking like someone who wants to change how businesses treat people and make the world a fairer place." His financial advisor, Emma Watson, who had been managing James's investments for many years, studied the detailed numbers and financial reports carefully. She had always been very careful with James's money and wanted to make sure he didn't make any dangerous mistakes. "The airline is losing money very quickly, James," Emma said with concern. "Even with all your resources and wealth, this is extremely risky and could cost you millions of pounds." James stood up slowly and walked to the large window that looked out over London's busy streets. He watched the people walking below and thought about his mother's wise words that had guided him throughout his entire life. "Emma, do you know what my mother used to tell me when I was a young boy?" James asked thoughtfully. "She said that sometimes the biggest risks in life lead to the most important changes in the world." He turned back to face his team of worried advisors, who had been with him through many successful business ventures over the years. "This isn't just about making money or expanding my business empire," James explained passionately. "Yesterday, I was humiliated and embarrassed not because I had done anything wrong, but because of unfair assumptions people made about me based on how I looked." How many other innocent people have experienced exactly the same thing? Over the following weeks, James began quietly purchasing shares in Skyline Airlines through various different investment companies. He was extremely careful not to reveal his true identity to anyone, allowing the stock price to remain low while he slowly accumulated a larger and larger stake in the company. His efficient assistant, Lucy, coordinated important meetings with discrimination lawyers and workplace equality experts from around the country. James wanted to understand not just the legal aspects of what had happened to him at the airport, but also the deeper systemic issues that caused such unfair incidents to happen regularly, sir. Lucy reported to James one busy afternoon. We've found 17 similar complaints against Skyline Airlines in just the past years. Most of these complaints were settled quietly with small payments to avoid bad publicity. James nodded thoughtfully as he processed this disturbing information about the airline's history of treating customers poorly. What about their employee training programs? James asked with growing concern. Almost non-existent, Lucy replied sadly. They provide basic safety training to meet legal requirements, but nothing about customer service excellence or cultural sensitivity training. As James continued buying more and more shares, he also began researching the airline's workforce and management structure. He discovered that despite serving a very diverse customer base from all over the world, their management team was remarkably similar. Senior positions were filled almost exclusively by people from very similar backgrounds who had never experienced discrimination themselves. 3 months after the embarrassing airport incident that had changed his life, James owned 47% of Skyline Airlines. The airline's board of directors had absolutely no idea who their new major shareholder was or what his plans might be. James called Thomas into his office one quiet Friday evening when the city was settling down for the weekend. "I'm ready to reveal myself to the board," James said with determination. "Schedule a board meeting for next week. It's time to introduce myself properly and show them what real change looks like." Thomas looked worried about his friend's bold plan. "James, once you do this, there's no going back to your old life. Are you absolutely sure this is what you want to do?" James smiled warmly, thinking of his mother's words about turning bitterness into something better. "Thomas, I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life." The large Skyline Airlines boardroom fell completely silent as James walked through the heavy wooden doors. The 12 board members, who were all sitting round the polished conference table, looked up in complete shock and disbelief. They were led by Chairman Peter Harrison, and they all stared with wide eyes as they suddenly realized their mystery investor was the same man who had been escorted off their plane just 4 months here. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension and surprise. Some board members whispered quietly to each other, while others sat frozen in their chairs, not knowing what to say or do. They had been expecting to meet with some unknown wealthy businessman, but instead they were facing the man they had embarrassed and humiliated. "Gentlemen," James said calmly and confidently, walking slowly to take his seat at the head of the long conference table, "I believe we have some very important changes to discuss today." Peter Harrison, a gray-haired man in his 60s who had been running the airline for many years, cleared his throat nervously. His hands were shaking slightly as he tried to maintain his composure in front of the other board members. "Mr. Thompson, we had absolutely no idea you were our new majority shareholder," Peter said, his voice trembling with anxiety. "If we had known, things would have been handled very differently." James looked round the room at each board member, making eye contact with every single person before responding. His expression was serious but not angry, showing that he was focused on the future rather than dwelling on the past. "I'm sure you didn't know," James replied in a steady voice. "But I'm not here today for apologies or excuses. I'm here to save this company and transform it into something much better than it has ever been." James stood up slowly and walked to the large presentation screen at the front of the room. He had prepared a detailed presentation that would show the board members exactly what needed to change and how they were going to accomplish it. This airline loses money every single month because it has completely forgotten how to truly serve its customers, James explained clearly. You've created a workplace culture where people like me are treated as suspicious and dangerous, rather than valued and respected. He clicked a button on his remote control to show his first slide, which displayed customer satisfaction ratings compared to other airlines. The numbers were shocking and embarrassing for everyone in the room to see. Your customer satisfaction scores are the lowest in the entire industry. James continued, "Do you know why your customers are so unhappy with your service?" The board members shifted uncomfortably in their expensive leather chairs as James continued his presentation. They had never seen such clear evidence of how badly their airline was performing compared to their competitors. "The reason is simple," James said firmly. "You've hired people who reflect only one narrow perspective and background. You've trained them to be suspicious and unwelcoming rather than friendly and helpful. You've created an environment where discrimination feels normal and acceptable." Over the next hour, James carefully laid out his complete transformation plan for the struggling airline. First, he would invest £50 million immediately to stabilize the airline's finances and prevent bankruptcy. Second, he would implement the most comprehensive diversity and inclusion training program in aviation history. But most importantly, James said, looking directly at each board member, "We're going to completely change who makes decisions in this company." Within 6 months of taking control, James had promoted 3 talented women and 2 people from minority backgrounds to senior executive positions. These were people who had been working for the airline for years but had never been given opportunities to advance because of unfair barriers. He also partnered with universities across the country to create scholarship programs for underrepresented students studying aviation and business. This would help ensure that future generations would have better opportunities in the airline industry. The changes weren't just symbolic gestures to make people feel good. James implemented entirely new customer service protocols that emphasized respect and dignity for every single passenger, regardless of their background or appearance. He created an anonymous reporting system for discrimination complaints and established a rapid response team to address problems immediately when they occurred. This meant that incidents like what happened to James would never happen again. Employee satisfaction scores began rising dramatically as staff members felt empowered to treat customers with genuine warmth, empathy, and respect. They were happier at work because they themselves were being treated with respect and given real opportunities for advancement. James also used his technology expertise to improve the airline's booking systems, making them more efficient and user-friendly. He introduced innovations that reduced wait times and improved communication between staff and passengers. The most significant change was cultural. James instituted monthly empathy training sessions where employees shared personal stories about times they had felt excluded or discriminated against. These sessions helped create genuine understanding and connection among the workforce. 9 months after taking control, Skyline Airlines reported its first profitable quarter in 3 years. 2 years after that humiliating and painful day at the airport, James stood in the exact same terminal where his life had changed forever. He was quietly watching passengers board a Skyline Airlines flight. And the difference from that terrible day was absolutely remarkable and inspiring to see. Staff members now greeted each and every passenger with genuine warmth and sincere smiles. A young black woman named Grace, who had recently been promoted to senior customer service manager, was carefully helping an elderly gentleman with his heavy luggage. She spoke to him kindly and made sure he felt comfortable and welcome. Nearby, a Pakistani man named Hassan, who had recently been promoted to flight operations manager, was efficiently coordinating the entire boarding process. He moved with confidence and purpose, making sure everything ran smoothly while treating every passenger with respect and dignity. The atmosphere in the terminal was completely different from 2 years ago. Passengers from all different backgrounds were chatting comfortably with staff members, and everyone seemed relaxed and happy. There was no tension or suspicion in the air like there had been before. Mr. Thompson called a familiar voice from behind him. James turned around slowly to see Robert, the security officer who had escorted him off the plane on that terrible day 2 years ago. James remembered Robert clearly. But he felt no anger or bitterness toward him. Instead, he was curious to hear what Robert had to say after all this time. "Robert," James said with a genuine smile on his face, "how are you doing these days?" Robert looked nervous but determined to speak his mind. His voice was filled with sincere emotion as he began to explain how much his life had changed since that day. "I wanted to thank you personally, sir," Robert said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. "The training programs you implemented throughout the company have completely changed how I see my job and my role here." James listened carefully as Robert continued to speak about his transformation as a person and as an employee. "I used to think I was just following procedures and rules without thinking about the people involved." Robert admitted honestly, "Now I understand that I'm serving real people with real feelings, and that makes all the difference in the world." James nodded thoughtfully, feeling proud of how much Robert had grown and changed. He could see the sincerity in Robert's eyes, and knew that this transformation was genuine and lasting. "We all make mistakes, Robert," James said kindly. "What matters most is learning from those mistakes and becoming better people because of them." The incredible transformation of Skyline Airlines had become a famous case study in business schools all across Europe. Professors used James's story to teach students about leadership, change management, and the power of turning negative experiences into positive outcomes. Other companies throughout the airline industry began implementing similar programs, creating a wonderful ripple effect of positive change that spread throughout the entire industry. James's courage to stand up and make changes had inspired countless other business leaders to examine their own practices. James had also established the Thompson Foundation for Equal Opportunity, using all the profits from his airline investment to fund scholarships and mentorship programs for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation had already helped over 1,000 students pursue successful careers in aviation, technology, and business. His beloved mother, Margaret, who was now 83 years old, often traveled with him on business trips. She would smile proudly as she watched her son interact with employees and customers, seeing how he had transformed his most painful experience into an opportunity to help thousands of other people. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Margaret told James one peaceful evening as they flew together to Manchester on the same route where his journey had begun. "What's that, Mom?" James asked, curious to hear his mother's thoughts. "You didn't let them make you bitter or angry," Margaret said with tears of pride in her eyes. "You used that terrible experience to become better and help others, just like we talked about when you were a little boy." James looked round the airplane cabin at passengers from all different backgrounds traveling comfortably together. They were being served by a diverse crew of employees who treated everyone with genuine respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance or background. The entire airline industry had changed because one man chose transformation over revenge. James had proven that the most powerful response to discrimination wasn't anger or bitterness, but the systematic creation of a better and fairer world for everyone. As their plane descended toward Manchester, James felt a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. He had successfully turned his most painful moment into his greatest contribution to society, and had helped create lasting change that would benefit countless people for years to come. Sometimes the longest and most important. Journeys begin with a single step off a plane. The end.